What if out of nowhere an angel appeared in your dream and said, "Don't take that flight," would you believe it? Or would you think it was just an illusion of your tired mind? Imagine for a moment that everything in your life is going normally, bags packed, trip booked, heart at peace, until in the dead of night you receive a warning so clear and intense that it seems to surpass the limits of logic. A warning coming from the invisible, from the divine. Today you will learn a story that is not only intriguing, but also deeply moving. One of those that makes us rethink whether we are really as alone as we imagine. A young man, seemingly ordinary, had his life turned upside down after a spiritual experience that many would classify as impossible to ignore. He was about to board a flight, but something, or someone, appeared to stop him. And the most impressive thing is that it all happened in a dream so real that it seemed more like a heavenly encounter. Do you believe in divine signs? Have you ever felt that strange sensation that something was trying to warn you? An inner voice, a premonition, a sudden delay, or even a dream with messages that seem more real than reality itself? Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover now may surprise you. There are reports of people saved by a thread. People who only understood the gravity of the situation after that everything happened. That they looked back and realized that something supernatural, perhaps an angel sent by God, silently intervened to protect them. Interventions that leave no doubt that there is a greater force taking care of every detail. This story that we are going to explore today is one of those cases. And no, it is not fiction, it is real, it is exciting, and it can even change the way you see the signs around you. In the world of spirituality, angels are often described as divine messengers, creatures of light that appear at the most unexpected moments to guide us, warn us, or even save us. But the most curious thing is that these manifestations do not always happen explicitly. Often, the signs come disguised as coincidence, intuition, or dreams that carry powerful messages. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever had that feeling that something bigger was trying to tell you something, even if you couldn't explain exactly what? What if I told you that these signs are often ignored, that many people only realize the presence of the angel after the tragedy has been avoided? Well, stories like these make us reflect deeply, not only about the existence of angels, but about our sensitivity to perceiving these interventions. Maybe you have already received a warning like this and didn't even realize it. Maybe you were saved without ever knowing it. But what happened to that young man who heard the warning in the dream? Why did he decide to believe it? What made him trust something that many would call delusional? And what happened to the flight he decided not to take? That's exactly what we're going to find out next. What happened to that flight? The morning after the dream, he woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly. It was like a presence, something that was still there as if the angel hadn't left. He sat up in bed, looked at the passage on the table, and remembered, word for word, what he had heard in the dream. Don't take that flight. It echoed in his mind like an urgent warning, impossible to ignore. And that's when he did the unthinkable. He cancelled the trip. It was that simple. Without any logical justification, without any proof that the flight was in danger, he simply trusted that voice that came from above. Hours later, the news exploded on the news. The plane he was supposed to have boarded crashed shortly after takeoff. No survivors. Can you imagine what it's like to live knowing that you escaped death because of such an inexplicable detail, because of a warning that came from a dream? This is not just a coincidence. It's a powerful reminder that there is something bigger at work, a divine force that watches over us even when we don't realize it. And that's exactly why stories like this need to be told. By the way, if this topic resonates with you, if at some point in your life you have felt that you received a sign, a warning, an invisible push that protected you from something, share it here in the comments. It may just be a detail, a feeling, or a story that you never had the courage to tell. But know this, your experience can touch other people deeply. It can open the eyes of those who are currently blind to the divine signs around them. And if you've come this far and are feeling something deep inside, that vibration in your chest, that desire to keep listening, please like this video. This will really help this content reach more people who may need to hear this exact message right now. And of course, if this type of topic inspires you, makes you reflect, or even moves you, subscribe to the channel. Your presence here is not just a number, it is part of a chain of light. With each new video, each new story, we are together strengthening this community that believes that the invisible also speaks. And sometimes it even shouts, but we need to be attentive to hear it. But back to the story. After everything happened, something changed inside him. He knew he was no longer the same. Because when an angel crosses your path, even in a dream, it is impossible to continue living the same way. Stories like the one about the man who heard the voice of an angel in a dream are more common than you might think. And perhaps the most surprising thing is to realize that often these spiritual signs are not accompanied by great visible miracles. They arrive subtly, like a whisper that makes you change your path, a strange feeling that prevents you from entering a place, a sudden sensation that something is wrong. And when we look back, only then do we realize that was a deliverance. In this video, I want to show you that angels are not just figures with shiny wings that appear in movies. They are also silent forces that touch us in our daily lives, in small gestures, in forgotten dreams, in thoughts that come out of nowhere and guide us in decisive moments. Some say they are just coincidences, but are they really? Imagine a woman who took the same route to work every day. On a normal day, like any other, she left home, and when she reached the corner where she always caught the bus, something stopped her. A chill ran down her spine, a sudden discomfort, almost as if someone was pulling her back. She took a deep breath, turned around, and decided to take a taxi. Minutes later, the bus she was supposed to be on was hit by an out-of-control truck. Several victims, chaos, mourning. But she was alive. And to this day, she cannot explain why she changed her mind that day. There is a hidden truth that few people have the courage to face. Many of us have been saved without even knowing it. We have received touches from the invisible, silent directions that have changed the course of our history. Sometimes we resist, we doubt, we try to rationalize, but our hearts know something bigger is at work. These stories of angelic intervention are more than just anecdotes. They invite us to rethink our mindset. Are we really paying attention, or are we too busy, distracted, rushing from one place to another without noticing the signs around us? Because one thing is certain, the signs come, and the impact they can have on our journey is profound. When we understand this, everything changes. We begin to see life with different eyes. We realize that we are not alone, that there is a spiritual network surrounding us, guiding us, protecting us. It is as if we are being guided by invisible hands that know the behind the scenes of what has not even happened yet. And when we make room to listen to these whispers of the divine, our intuition is strengthened, our confidence grows, and decisions begin to come with more clarity. Many of the stories you will read here today talk exactly about this point. The moment of decision. The moment when the person felt something inexplicable, and by trusting that feeling, avoided the worst. A father who gave up on traveling with his family because of a strange dream. A teenager who was late leaving home because she felt a sudden anguish in her chest. A mother who took her son out of the car a minute before an accident happened. These are details almost invisible, but with gigantic consequences. The most fascinating thing is that in many cases, people didn't even know they were being protected. They only understood later, when they saw the news, when they found out what had happened. And then comes that strange feeling, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and astonishment. Because it's impossible not to ask yourself, who protected me? Where did that feeling come from? And maybe deep down you've also experienced something like this. A sudden change of route, an unexpected encounter that took you away from a place, an annoying delay that later made perfect sense. If this reminds you of something, if it resonated with you, write in the comments, I'm on this journey too. Because when we share, we strengthen this invisible link that connects us. Because there are stories that simply have no logical explanation, and that is precisely why they touch us in a special way. They stir something inside us that goes beyond reason. a kind of silent, almost forgotten truth that awakens only when we are confronted with the mystery. Lucas was a young businessman, someone focused, ambitious, always racing against time. He grew up hearing that he needed to be rational, that success came from the mind, never from the heart. And for a long time, that was exactly how he lived. Focused on business, on numbers, on results. He was the kind of person who would look at a story of divine intervention and say, coincidence. But everything changed on an ordinary, seemingly meaningless night. Lucas had a trip scheduled for the next day, an early flight, the kind he didn't think twice about boarding. He was already used to the routine, airport, meeting, hotel. But that night, something different happened. He had a dream. And it wasn't just any dream. It was vivid, intense, as if he were actually there, awake within his own unconscious. An angel appeared. It had no wings or bright lights, but there was a peace on the figure's face that Lucas had never felt before. The angel looked him in the eye and said with unshakable serenity, "Don't get on that flight tomorrow." And it disappeared. Lucas woke up sweating, his heart racing. He tried to ignore it. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination. But the more he tried to follow his routine, the more that image came back. The angel's gaze, the firmness of those words, the feeling that something was pushing him in another direction. Against all his logical instincts, he made a decision. He didn't get on the plane. Hours later, that same flight crashed. No survivors. At that moment, something inside Lucas broke, and something new was born. A part of him that had always been suppressed, that he had never given space to grow, finally woke up. And that was when a true transformation began. Because when death is so close, we stop playing with life. We start to see with the eyes of the soul. And that changes everything. Lucas's mindset was never the same again. He began to notice signs that he had previously ignored. Small coincidences, sudden feelings, intuitions that appeared out of nowhere. And that, for some reason, always led him to better decisions. It was as if a new layer of reality had been revealed, as if the backstage of the visible world had opened up for just an instant, and he could never see things the way he had before. Stories like Luke's invite us to reflect. What if all of this is real? What if there are indeed spiritual forces around us trying to guide us, protect us, direct us, but that depend on our sensitivity to be heard? What if faith is not about religion, but about connection, about being open to what the invisible is trying to tell us? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also liberating, because they take us out of automatic mode. They make us realize that there is much more going on than meets the eye, that behind every decision, every delay, every seemingly random change of plans, there may be a greater purpose hidden. And that's where something even deeper comes in, the power of silent choices. Because Lucas could have ignored that dream. He could have laughed, thought it was silly, moved on as he always did. But he chose to listen. He chose to trust. And that choice, made in the silence of the early morning, saved his life. How many times do we have the chance to make a similar choice, but we don't realize it? How many times do we feel that discomfort, that uneasiness, that intuition, and ignore it for fear of seeming irrational? Maybe if we stopped for a while, if we listened more to the world around us and to the world within us, we would find a different path, more aligned, more truthful. The hidden truth is that angels are not just in the big moments. They are in the details. In the seemingly casual encounters, in the decisions we make without knowing why, in the signs the universe sends us that we can only pick up on when we slow down and look with our hearts. Lucas didn't see a cinematic miracle. He had a dream. But that dream was the bridge between the world he knew and a new reality where everything is more subtle, more symbolic, more connected. A reality where the invisible has weight and where silence can be the most powerful. Voice, if you've ever felt something similar, a warning, an intuition, a strange sensation that later made perfect sense, comment below. That makes sense to me. Because every story we share here helps to bring more light to this side of life that few people talk about. But that changes everything. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because Luke's case, as extraordinary as it may seem, is not an isolated exception within what has already been experienced and recorded throughout the history of humanity. For centuries, people have reported encounters, warnings, dreams, and deliverances that simply cannot be explained by common logic. And the Bible, this book as ancient as it is current, holds between its lines a series of revelations that help us understand these experiences from a broader and at the same time more intimate perspective. When we talk about angels, the image that usually comes to mind is almost always the same: winged beings, dressed in white, surrounded by light. But this representation is symbolic. What the Bible shows goes far beyond that. There, angels are not just messengers. They are silent guardians, invisible companions on the human journey, present behind the scenes of great events and also in the simplest moments of our daily lives. In Hebrews 1:14, for example, it is written, "Are they not all ministering spirits, sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation?" This phrase, so direct and so powerful, reveals a hidden truth that goes unnoticed by many. Angels are not far away. They do not appear only on spectacular occasions. They are close by. They have always been. But perhaps the most impactful part of all this is precisely the word serve, because it reveals the nature of this connection. It is not a relationship of spectacle, it is a relationship of care. Angels serve. They are sent to protect, to guide, to act in favor of those who are part of a greater plan. And this completely changes the way we see these inexplicable moments that arise in the middle of our routine. Remember that time you almost took a path, and at the last minute, something made you change your mind? Or that day when an inner voice almost whispered, made you stop, look again, and avoid a tragedy? How many times have you been saved and not even realized it? Because that's exactly how many interventions happen, discreet, subtle, but with a profound impact. In the story of Daniel, for example, when he was thrown into the lion's den, the biblical text clearly says that an angel was sent to close the mouths of the animals. This was not symbolic. It was literal. There was a direct, decisive intervention. And this type of action is repeated throughout the scriptures. From the patriarchs to the apostles, there is always the figure of the angel acting as a link between heaven and earth. But what about today? Does it still happen? Yes. The difference is that today we have lost our sensitivity. Modern life is noisy, full of stimuli, distractions, and haste. We have become accustomed to rationalizing everything, to seeking immediate, visible answers. And when something doesn't fit into this logic, we simply ignore it. But the spiritual doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you don't slow down, you won't hear it. Many people wonder, why does nothing like this ever happen to me? Maybe it's because you're expecting the extraordinary when in fact most manifestations come through the ordinary. A person who crosses your path with the right word, a delay that takes you out of the right place at the wrong time, an internal impulse that you can't explain but that completely changes the course of your day or your life. True spirituality begins with this sensitivity, with this active listening, with the humility to accept that there are greater forces at work beyond what we can see. And this has nothing to do with superstition. It has to do with alignment, with perception, with awareness. Deep down, angels are always at work, not to interfere with our freedom, but to give us clues, to offer us a chance, to remind us that we are not alone even when it seems so. They are like trails in the middle of the forest. You can follow them or ignore them, but they are there. And those who have learned to see these trails will never walk in the dark the same way again. And when we understand this, everything changes. Because it's not just about believing in spiritual beings, it's about recognizing that there is a constant movement happening on our behalf. A force that is constantly trying to bring us closer to the truth. Not the truth of the world, which changes with the seasons, but the truth that remains. That we are loved, guided, and protected, even in the moments when we think we have been forgotten. The Bible doesn't tell these stories to entertain, it tells them to awaken, to show that there is a pattern, that what happened to Moses, to Mary, to Peter, to Paul, can happen to me and to you. That the angels who spoke to them each are still on mission, and that the same God who sent them continues to send them today. If you've ever felt something like this, an unexplained deliverance, an intuition that saved you, a sudden peace, in the midst of chaos, write in the comments, "I'm on that journey too." Because when we share these experiences, we validate a dimension that the world tries to silence, but that never ceased to exist. Because when we talk about the actions of angels, we are not just talking about grandiose episodes, stories that seem to have been taken from an epic book or a supernatural film. Often, what really changes the course of someone's life is not the obvious miracle, but the subtle detail. That seemingly banal moment, but one that carries a silent and decisive force. And the most curious thing is that most of the time these signs are ignored. They go unnoticed, or worse, they are dismissed as mere coincidences. But is there really such a thing as coincidence? Or are we so distracted, so caught up in our fast-paced routine and immediate logic, that we fail to notice the warnings that come to us at the most unexpected moments? You know that strange delay that made you miss the bus? That sudden discomfort that made you cancel an appointment? That intense, almost cinematic dream that made you wake up with your heart racing and the feeling that it wasn't just a dream? Well, that's right. These are the behind-the-scenes details of the spiritual journey that few see and that many simply ignore. Some people call it intuition. Others say it's a hunch. But the truth is that behind these episodes, there may be something much deeper at work. Something that can't be explained with formulas, but that can be felt clearly. And generally it comes loaded with a type of certainty that doesn't fit into logic, but that remains inside us as if to say, that was no accident. In the Bible, God often communicated through dreams. Joseph, Mary's husband, received clear instructions through dreams, warnings that saved his family. And the interesting thing is that he believed. He didn't doubt it. He didn't ignore it. He realized that this was more than a random thought in his sleep. It was direction. It was intervention. Today, these signs continue to happen. But how many times do we simply say, "Oh, it was just a weird dream," or "I must be getting paranoid," and so we miss what could be a turning point, a revelation, a key. This is why inner silence becomes so important, because it puts us in a state of listening, and only those who slow down can listen, those who have the courage to get out of automatic mode. Because angels don't usually make noise. They don't knock on the door with a bang. They manifest themselves as breezes, gentle, persistent, and full of meaning for those who know how to pay attention. That inner voice, for example, the one that insists when everything else seems normal. The one that says, "Don't go there," or "time." It's almost always subtle. But when ignored, the effects appear later, and then comes the regret. "I knew I shouldn't have gone. Something told me not to do that." Phrases like these are not uncommon, and they reveal exactly how much we are surrounded by warnings, only that our rational mind tries to silence what the spirit has already understood. Behind many bad decisions, there is a sign that is ignored. And behind many deliverances, there is a sign that is obeyed. Sometimes it is a child saying something that has no logical explanation. Other times it is a stranger on the street, speaking so precisely that it seems to have read your soul. Or even a verse that appears precisely on the day you needed it most. Coincidence? Or a synchronicity so precise that it can only have been engineered by something or someone beyond our comprehension. This is the part that changes our mindset, because it forces us to look at reality with different eyes, to admit that not everything is under our control, and that there is an intelligence behind events that challenges us to be more sensitive, more attentive, more connected. There are people who only realize things after the impact, after the storm, and they say, "Something tried to warn me." But what if you trained your spirit to realize things beforehand? What if you decided to develop this listening, not to escape suffering, but to walk with more wisdom, more awareness, more truth? This is where the concept of spiritual discernment comes in. Something that goes beyond religious faith. It's about perception, about knowing when something isn't just coming from your mind. When there's a subtle push, a slight interference, but it completely changes the course. Sometimes it's as if the world is normal, but inside you everything is screaming, "That's not right." This is the kind of sensitivity that can save a life, or even several. And do you know what's most interesting? The signs are not random. They have patterns, frequencies, repetitions. Sometimes the same type of warning appears 3 or 4 times in different contexts. A phrase that you hear in a video, then in a conversation, and then see written on a wall. The mind may find it curious, but the spirit understands. This is for me. And when you start responding to these signals, something changes. You align. The pieces start to fit together more fluidly. Decisions become clearer. And even in the storms, you no longer feel alone, because there is an awareness that there is something, or someone, guiding you with purpose. This completely transforms the journey. Many people associate angelic intervention only with visible miracles, but the greatest miracles happen within. When a person is about to make a destructive decision and something stops them. When a wounded heart finds solace through a word that comes at just the right time. When someone turns away from a dark path because they suddenly feel a light inside them. This is as powerful as any physical miracle, and here lies the hidden truth that few tell. Most angelic signs do not come to impress. They come to teach, to correct the course, to avoid an emotional, spiritual, or physical tragedy. And if you are willing to listen, they become increasingly clear. It is as if you begin to tune into a frequency that has always existed, but that you had never stopped to notice. So, the next time something seems too strange to be just a coincidence, stop for a moment, reflect, ask yourself, what is this trying to show me? Because it could be an intervention, a care, a touch from the invisible trying to reach you in the midst of chaos. Write in the comments, that makes sense to me, if you have ever experienced or noticed something like this. And the more you fine-tune this perception, the more the signs begin to make sense, as if the invisible stopped being just a mystery and began to reveal itself in a practical, accessible, and above all, transformative way. By the way, if this topic has resonated with you so far, if all this about signs, intuitions, and subtle interventions made sense, there is a material that I prepared very carefully and that can help you even more on this journey. Its name is Reading Your Birth Angel. It is something direct and practical, designed exactly for those who feel that there is something else trying to guide their steps and want to understand it more clearly, as connect with this personalized guidance from the angelic kingdom to navigate moments of transformation with more awareness and direction. If it makes sense to you, take a look at the material I left below. It's in the description, but I may take it down in the next few days, because I don't always make it available. So, if this is useful to you, take advantage of it while it's still available. This content complements what we talked about here and can save you a lot of time in practice, especially if you feel like you're in the middle of important decisions or internal changes that you don't yet know how to fully interpret. Now, let's move on, because there's something even deeper that I want to show you about this connection with the invisible. Cases like Anna and Pedro's remind us that sometimes the invisible screams, even if silently. And the most curious thing is that in these moments, the rational mind even tries to justify what happened. It was just a hunch. It was luck. It was a coincidence. But deep down, those who have been through this know it doesn't seem like a coincidence. It seems like purpose. It seems like protection. Anna was about to leave the house to meet a friend when she heard a voice clearly whispering, "Don't go." She froze. It wasn't a vague feeling or a hunch. It was a clear, strong instruction that made her skin crawl. She hesitated, took a deep breath, and even though she didn't understand, she decided to obey. Hours later, she discovered that the place where she was going to meet her friend was the scene of a violent robbery and shooting. She almost wasn't there. It wasn't the first time this had happened to her, but it was the most memorable. Since then, she says she's come to respect whispers more, even when they don't make immediate sense. Pedro's case is equally impressive. He had everything ready, ticket in hand, documents, suitcase. But for some reason that he can't explain to this day, he forgot his backpack with his wallet inside the house, something that it happened. He only realized he had forgotten to leave on the way to the airport and had to run back. When he arrived, the gate was already closed. He missed his flight, Angry, frustrated, and late for an important meeting, Pedro spent the rest of the day in silence, trying to accept his mistake. Until later, he saw the news. The plane had crashed minutes after takeoff. No survivors. The silence that enveloped him at that moment was not one of shock. It was one of reverence. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or simply be grateful. These reports are not isolated. There is a growing number of people who, even without formal religious ties, report similar experiences, strangely clear dreams, voices that do not know where they come from, physical sensations disconnected from logic. And it is precisely this that opens space for a hidden truth often ignored. Spirituality does not depend on our total understanding. It does not expect you to understand everything. It just needs you to realize when something is out of the ordinary, and that you have the courage to respect it. And when we start looking at these events through this new lens, our perception changes. What once seemed disconnected starts to form a pattern. The pieces start to fit together. And perhaps the big key is this: stop looking for immediate answers and start asking better questions. Why did I have such a vivid dream? Why did I feel that shiver out of nowhere? Why did I forget something that I never forget? Why did that person say exactly that at exactly the right moment? Coincidence, or a message that I almost ignored? This doesn't mean falling into paranoia or seeing signs in absolutely everything, but rather developing a balanced sensitivity. Because intuition, when mature, becomes a powerful tool, almost like a sixth sense. And it's not magic, it's tuning. It's as if you start to capture a frequency that was always there, but before it was muffled by the noise of routine, anxiety, and distractions. Behind the scenes of this visible reality, something greater seems to be at work, as if there were an invisible code coordinating meetings, delays, and deliverances. And it is no wonder that even in different cultures, different times, and different beliefs, the story of premonitions that saved lives is repeated. In all these stories, there is a common thread: impact. A small decision that changed the course of an entire existence. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a crucial point in this journey between signs and divine protection that many people ignore. And it is precisely there that one of the greatest spiritual revelations of practical life is hidden. Comment here. That makes sense to me. And this is one of the most surprising parts of this journey. The angel doesn't always appear with wings. It isn't always a bright light or an obvious presence. Sometimes it manifests itself in the form of a phrase spoken by a stranger, something seemingly simple, but that touches directly on a doubt that you've been carrying for days. Sometimes it's a delay that's frustrating at the time, but that later turns out to have avoided an unpleasant encounter or even an accident. And on other occasions, it's just a strange feeling in your chest, a restlessness that has no name but that insists on taking you away from where you are. This is one of the most misunderstood hidden truths when it comes to spiritual intervention. It is rarely spectacular. It is quiet, but it is necessary. And believe me, that is even more powerful, because it means that spirituality is intertwined with everyday life. It is not restricted to the mystical, the extraordinary, the out of reach. It is in the now, in the simple, in the unseen that acts as you live. Think about it. How many times have you made a decision based on perfect, rational logic, but still something felt wrong? And how many times, when everything seemed uncertain, did you simply feel that it was the right path? And it was? This happens because there is something operating beyond what the mind can explain. And the curious thing is that the more you start to observe these small details, the more you realize that nothing is as random as it seems. It's as if the universe has its own language, and those who pay attention learn to decipher it. People, situations, random conversations, unexpected events, all of these can be vehicles for a message you need to receive. And this changes the way we see coincidences. Because, with an awakened mindset, coincidence becomes a sign, and a sign becomes a direction. A woman named Lucia once told me something like this. She was going through a difficult time, full of doubts, unsure about a career choice that would change everything. On her way home, she decided to stop at a bakery she never went to. In the line, she started a random conversation with a friendly lady, the kind who starts a conversation just by looking at you. Without knowing anything, this lady said a phrase that seemed to have been taken directly from Lucia's thoughts. "We never regret following what our heart whispers softly, even when no one understands." That wasn't just advice. It was an answer, a gift, coming from where she least expected it. And when we look through this lens, we realize that angels, or higher powers, whatever you want to call them, are not distant or unattainable. They reveal themselves behind the scenes of life, using what is already around us. And they do this not to impress but to direct. There is intelligence in this process, because it is precisely in simplicity that impact lies. A dream you can't forget, a number that repeats itself over and over again, a song that plays exactly when you were thinking of giving up, an unexpected encounter that makes you rethink everything. These experiences are not random. They are reminders that you are being guided, even if you don't always realize it right away. And here comes something even deeper. There is a responsibility that comes with this realization. Because from the moment you understand that signs exist, ignoring them becomes a choice, and often life keeps repeating the same warning in different ways until you are ready to listen. And when you finally listen, something inside you changes. It is as if the veil falls, and what once seemed confusing becomes aligned. This inner transformation does not depend on religion or ritual. It depends on presence, on the courage to question, on the surrender to accept that perhaps the greater plan is different from what you imagined, but still better. With each sign recognized, your spiritual sensitivity expands, and that is where the true journey begins. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the signs is just the beginning. There is an even more delicate and revealing point. How do we know when to act, when to wait, and when to trust, even without visible guarantees? Write it down. I'm on this journey too. This is perhaps one of the most intimate and important questions of this entire journey. How do we know if it was a real sign or just a figment of our imagination? After all, not every shiver is spiritual, and not every strange dream means a message from above. But there is something that the logical mind cannot explain, and the heart feels clearly. That is where the secret lies. Because the spiritual, when it is true, carries a unique signature. Peace. Yes, peace. A peace that does not come from the absence of problems, but from a silent certainty that even without understanding everything, you are being guided. And this is something that cannot be forced. It cannot be faked. When you receive a genuine signal, even if it goes against what you wanted to hear, there is a calm that invades you, as if a forgotten part of your soul simply said, "Now, yes." And this in itself is already one of the greatest indicators that something greater is in motion. Another point you need to observe, and here things get even more interesting, is repetition. When the signal is real, it doesn't just appear. Once it persists, it comes back in different forms. It comes in a random conversation, then in a video you weren't even going to watch, then in a dream or in a piece of music that gets stuck in your head for no apparent reason. This is not a coincidence. This is reinforcement. It's as if the invisible is trying to get your attention patiently, but also with a certain urgency. And here comes one of the most impactful parts of this whole experience: protection. When you act according to this type of signal, even without understanding everything at the time, the backstage begins to move. Doors open, others close, and the most curious thing, what could hurt you simply doesn't happen. It could be an accident that was avoided, a contract that seemed great but saved you from a tight spot, or even a friendship that fell apart and you later understood why. This invisible protection, which acts on the details, is yet another confirmation that you were being protected. But be careful. Not all comfort is a sign of direction, and not all difficulty means divine absence. Sometimes the sign comes in the form of discomfort, that persistent annoyance that pushes you out of a zone that no longer belongs to you. And discerning this requires sensitivity, because the heart and the ego have similar voices. Both scream, both want security, but only one of them leads you on the path of real transformation. That's why connecting with the invisible requires practice, not in the sense of formulas or mandatory rituals, but in the willingness to listen more than react, to observe before deciding, to feel before judging. Because when you cultivate this internal listening, you fine-tune the channel of perception, and signs that previously went unnoticed begin to shine like beacons in the darkness. A woman named Marta once wrote to me saying she was about to close a big deal. Everything seemed right: the contract, the numbers, the opportunity. But something inside her resisted. She tried to ignore it. Her mind said go, but her body reacted with insomnia, tightness in her chest, constant distraction. So she did something simple. She stopped. She breathed. She asked for clarity. And in the following days, small details that had previously been hidden began to emerge. An obscure clause, a dubious history of the partner company, until in an almost silent gesture, she decided not to sign. A few months later, the company went bankrupt, and she understood. This was not just intuition, it was deliverance. This type of experience is more common than we think. The problem is that many people ignore the signs because they are expecting something grand, a Hollywood miracle. But the hidden truth is that the spiritual is subtle. It doesn't shout, it suggests. And those who are in a hurry don't listen. That's why listening is an act of courage, of presence, of faith in the journey, even when the path isn't completely illuminated. And there's more. The more you respond to the small signs, the more the big ones appear. It's as if the universe is testing your attention, first with whispers, then with nudges, and finally, if necessary, with shocks, not as punishment, but as care. Because when you don't respond to the soft signs, life uses the impact to wake up what was dormant. And it's worth remembering, it's not about becoming paranoid or thinking that everything is a sign. It's about developing an alert mindset, sensitive to the fine print of your own existence. Because when you realize that you're not alone, every detail takes on meaning, and that changes everything. Decisions are no longer just rational choices. They become responses aligned with something much bigger than the present moment. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a spiritual dimension that many people ignore. The invisible influence that tries to keep you away from this connection with the signs, and how it acts in ways that are much more subtle than you imagine. Comment here. That makes sense to me, and this is exactly where many people get it wrong. Because when we talk about angels, protection and deliverance, most people immediately think of accidents avoided, illnesses cured, robberies foiled, or things like that. And yes, that happens, of course, but what almost no one sees is that the most important signs are not linked to the physical, but to the invisible. There is something much bigger unfolding behind every decision you make, behind every step you take. And the signs are often a direct call to keep you connected to your deeper purpose, even if you don't know what it is yet. Sometimes that cancelled flight that made you furious wasn't saving you from an accident, but from a detour, from a disconnection. Maybe that place you couldn't visit was the beginning of a path where your light would slowly fade. Or maybe that relationship that ended abruptly without explanation was an emotional distraction that would prevent you from seeing who you really are. The hidden truth that no one wants to face is that the spiritual world cares less about what you want and much more about who you are becoming. And sometimes, in order for you to wake up, you have to lose what you think you need. And this is where a quiet transformation begins. Because when you start looking at signs not as immediate solutions, but as messages that align you with something bigger, everything changes. Suffering takes on meaning, pauses gain direction, losses become teachers. Angels aren't concerned with your comfort zone. They're committed to your destiny. And destiny isn't always comfortable, but it's necessary. There is a spiritual mindset that completely changes the way you interpret events. Understanding that today's delay could be tomorrow's door. That today's rejection could be the most important redirection in your life. It's as if each apparent failure is actually taking you off a dead-end road. But for this to make sense, you need to see what's behind it. the purpose. And the purpose is almost always deeper than it seems. A story that always comes to mind is that of a man named Elijah. He had a trip scheduled for a job interview that could change his life. Everything was ready. His resume was printed, his clothes were ready, and his spirits were high. But the day before, his car had an unexplained problem. He called the mechanic, but nothing. He tried to get a taxi, but they were all busy. Buses? None at that time. He missed the interview. He was angry, he questioned God, he cried. But a week later, the company where he was going to interview was involved in a corruption scandal. Employees were arrested, salaries were withheld, reputations were destroyed. It was only then that he understood. It wasn't about the job. It was about spiritual protection. It was about a mission. It was about deliverance. And how many times has this happened to you? Situations that at the time seemed unfair, cruel, senseless. But that, over time, revealed a wisdom that you would never have realized on your own. That's where the revelation lies, because you were not made to move only by logic. There is a higher movement, where time and space align so that you not only live but accomplish something. This something is what many call a mission, others a destiny, others a purpose. But whatever name you prefer to use, the fact is that you are not here by chance, and when a sign frees you from a trap or keeps you away from an opportunity that seemed perfect, it is often because your spirit recognized a deviation before. Your mind could even understand it, and the angels acted. What's even more powerful to understand is that signs don't just appear to protect us from danger. Sometimes they appear to provoke us, to shake us up, to shake us out of our stagnation. A job that ends suddenly, a relationship that falls apart, a friend who walks away. It may feel like loss, but often it's liberation. Not because you deserved to suffer, but because you were walking away from something essential. And the essential deep down is always about your essence, what you were called to be, and this is where we need to talk about the behind the scenes. Because what the eyes don't see, the spiritual sees from afar. Maybe you were going to a place where your light would be stifled. Maybe you were about to get involved with people who would pull you down in a subtle, slow, almost imperceptible way. Maybe that promising project was actually a shortcut that would rob you of years of true growth. And then the sign comes, a delay, a no, a loss. And you get frustrated without realizing that the sky was moving. That's why trusting the signs requires more than faith, it requires surrender. Because it won't always make sense in the moment. But if you can walk through the frustration with your eyes open and your heart open, the impact of the revelation will transform your story. Because angels aren't just around to protect you from harm. They're there to remind you who you are and what you came here to do. And that goes far deeper than any momentary blessing. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because there is a silent resistance that works precisely to disconnect you from the signals. And it is more common, more subtle, and more dangerous than it seems. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. You know that strange feeling as if something pulls you back at the last second. As if an invisible force tells you, don't go that way. Sometimes it's a premonition, sometimes an inexplicable discomfort, a restlessness that comes out of nowhere. It's curious how, even surrounded by technology, information, and logic, we still feel touched by something that is beyond rational explanation. And the most impressive thing is that when we ignore this feeling, we almost always regret it later. It's as if a part of us has access to the backstage of reality and is trying to warn us. This silent part is where the spiritual communicates, not with words, but with signs, not with promises, but with directions. And when you start paying attention, you realize that the greatest deliverances in your life may not have involved major tragedies that were avoided, but rather small decisions that changed the course of everything. A no that hurt but protected you. A door that closed but pushed you towards a bigger one. And most importantly, those situations in which everything seemed to be going wrong, but that later turned out to be exactly what you needed. The transformation begins there, when you understand that not all pain is punishment, not all loss is defeat, not all silence is absence. There is a spiritual intelligence in motion, a care that is not limited to what you see, but that acts on things you cannot even imagine yet. And this requires a different kind of sensitivity, deep listening, a connection beyond the noise of the world, because spiritual life is not just about religion. It is about perception. It is about recognizing the invisible in the details. It is about developing the mindset of someone who is awake and knows that every movement, every interruption, every delay can contain a revelation. And this revelation often is yourself. Because the signs don't appear just to free you from what's outside. They appear to confront you with what's inside, with your fears, your patterns, your repetitions. How many times have you been saved from a toxic cycle and not even realized it? How many times have you been prevented from going back to something that no longer served you? Sometimes the greatest deliverance isn't external, it's awakening. It's when life turns you inside out to show you who you were becoming and who you could be if you dared to listen. And in this process, there is a spiritual pattern that almost no one talks about, disguised resistance. It presents itself as distraction, as doubt, as haste. It makes you disbelieve the signs, makes you ignore the subtle hints, pushes you back to automatic. And you, without realizing it, start to justify everything with logic. You start to explain the inexplicable with shallow arguments. You start to call coincidence what in fact was intervention. This is the blind spot of many people, the moment when the mind tries to silence the soul. But the soul feels, the soul knows, and it is the soul that calls you when everything falls apart. It is the soul that whispers when the world screams. It is the soul that understands the silence of the angels. And when you begin to listen, even if little by little, a new kind of strength is born within you, a different kind of courage, a peace that does not depend on control, because you know that you are being guided, even without understanding everything, even without seeing the complete path. And that's when a lot of things start to fall into place. Decisions become easier, fears lose strength, losses gain meaning. Because when you reach this level of listening, you realize that everything has a purpose, including what hurt, including what broke you, including what seemed unfair. And this realization is liberating, because it takes you out of the position of victim of events and places you as an active part of a greater journey, a journey where signs are no longer ignored but honored, where every intuition is considered, where every no is a possibility in disguise. And perhaps this is the great call behind it all, to trust again, to trust that you are not alone, that there is a silent alliance between you and the invisible, that angels are not only in ancient stories or miraculous accounts, they are in your routine, in the details, in the unexpected, in that phone call that made you late, in that bus you missed, in the email that didn't arrive, in the unexpected encounters and the necessary misunderstandings. All of this can be part of a divine symphony, and you are at the center of the melody. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because there is an even more powerful truth behind these signs, and it has to do with the impact your life can have when you finally understand what is being asked of you. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this message touched you in some way. And if it made sense to you, just imagine what's still to come. Here we talk about what really matters, about signs, faith, purpose, and the decisions that change everything from the inside. So, if this type of content resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any of the upcoming meetings that honestly have the power to transform the way you see life. Take advantage and leave your comments. This message was for me. I want to know who stayed with me until the end, because this connection makes all the difference. And of course, if this video brought you peace, reflection, or even answers, leave a like. This helps keep this exchange alive. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. We still have a lot to talk about.